Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. And if this is your weekend, happy beginning of your weekend for all of you that work in the service industry. You know, when I was a professional musician, this was my beginning of my weekend. Well, if you like this show, hit like and subscribe. Get that out of the way before we start. As you know, I have the opportunity for you to give your questions. If you have any questions for me, ask the rabbi type questions. Anything you want to know about Judaism but we're afraid to ask, you can see at the bottom here on the ticker, rabbibentley@gmail.com. So far, you all seem to be a little shy, so don't be shy. So anyway, let's get on with the show. I got a couple of things I want to get off my mind. I want to talk about today. The first thing, I put it on the lists, but the first thing really is, it was a statement that was made by Abbas, who is the leader of the Palestinian Authority, and he made this statement to the German chancellery, to the German parliament, that Israel has perpetrated against the Palestinians 50 Holocausts. Right? No apologizing for the Munich, the Munich massacre, the 1972 Olympics, and right, that happened in Germany, that was perpetrated by his organization. Yet he said 50 Holocausts. And the German chancellor, he got a bunch of shit for just sitting there silently, not saying anything. I suspect that there was no malice with the German chancellor there. I think he was just kind of didn't quite know how to react to that. So it brings to the question the misappropriation of the word Holocaust. Now, to say that the IDF has perpetrated 50 plus Holocausts, and to compare Israel's fighting for the security of a country, for the life of our country, to the Holocaust is just inappropriate and it's just not true. It's not how it is working. And if you really look at it, Abbas is the Palestinian Authority is not a democracy. They haven't had elections in years. Why haven't they had elections? They haven't had elections because they're afraid of losing to Hamas, who would be even worse. Now, I'm not sitting here and suggesting that the Palestinians don't deserve their own state. That I've lived in areas where there are refugee camps. I see how they live. I understand the frustration of their regular people. But the throwing out of the Holocaust, and not just by Abbas, but the throwing out of the Holocaust against 6 million of my people, and another additional 10 million. I mean, additional 11 to 12 million people in general, from people, LGBT community, to people who are disabled, to the Poles and the Russians that were exterminated in the camps, or anyone that they considered ethnic minorities and gypsies, right? To extend that to, and people just are throwing it out there wherever they want. It's come back to the United States of America, right? It's being thrown out, the word Holocaust, or the word Nazi, every time someone wants to say something, or mosque protocols, or getting a immunization vaccine. I was listening to an interesting podcast, and in that podcast they were talking about the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community and how polio in certain areas of New York is becoming a threat again because of vaccine misinformation during COVID that is now making something like polio. Who would have thought people are getting paralyzed with polio again in the 21st century? And and people were saying, you're a Nazi for making me get vaccinated to protect other people, or whatever it is, right? I mean, I don't want to get into the controversy of whether the vaccines are effective. My wife just got over COVID and she's been boosted, right? So we know that the vaccines are not perfect, but at some point, maybe they did. If more people if it hadn't have become politicized, if the words like, you're a Nazi for making me do this to protect someone else's life, using the word Holocaust, misappropriating the Holocaust, what will it essentially do is make it so that we are going to end up repeating the mistake of history. And when we can lay back and sit back and tolerate things that look like fascism, that look like the beginning of accepting or denying it minimizes the Holocaust by comparing it to things like, you're taking away my freedom. They don't even understand what freedom really means. What does it mean, my freedom? While at the same time, right, if you look at what's going on, they're suggesting that they want to criminalize abortion at conception. Think about that for a minute. This brings me a little bit to my Game of Thrones. I talked to, if any of you Game of Thrones fans, right, the House of the Dragon, the new Game of Thrones theory. It's Monday morning. I've only had 2 coffees. The new Game of Thrones series that started on HBO Max on Sunday. If you haven't seen it yet, was kind of a lesson about making the mistakes of history, looking back at history, seeing how history can be repeated. And I thought it was a brilliant way they connected. I'm not only spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. But there was one scene in there I thought was very powerful. And it had to do with choosing the life of a child over the life of the mother. And this brutal way that this woman died. And in the end, the child also died. And so this is a parody of what's happening in the Middle Ages. But we know that if you want to criminalize, with no exceptions, any type of abortion because you have decided that the dividing of cells in a body is life itself, and so you're guilty of murder, and they want to regulate this on a federal level, I don't understand how that is not the rise of fascism. To me, that is the rise of fascism. They say my body, my choice when it comes to masks, or it comes to, being careful around people who might be immune compromised because they could just cough all over. Or you see these idiots coughing over people, right? It's just common courtesy. But my body, my choice only applies when it's something they agree with, not something when someone else agrees with. And so I think that Game of Thrones, was it intentional or was it not intentional? Or did the author, was it just put in there, it was just a matter of coincidence that we see today, that you see the brutality of how women by not given that choice, right? We can understand, when the life of a woman should the life of someone that already is living, is already breathing, that has an existence, right? There is sentience, right? There's consciousness. There's no consciousness in dividing cells. There's a potential of life there. And, we can regulate it, and it should be regulated on, say, federally, you're a murderer. If you want to put the life of a mother first, that, to me, is fascism. That is, to me, you're infringing on my First Amendment freedom of religion, because my religion, Judaism, does not state that. Does not look at life beginning at conception. It looks at the potential of life. It looks at the actual idea of life really begins at the first breath. And there are many situations, and we know this, where the life of the mother needs to take precedence. And there are many things that we could do in public health policy as well, where we can minimize the amount of unnecessary abortions or the unnecessary abortions, the dissemination of birth control. Why start defunding Planned Parenthood, which will make it so that there is less of a need for abortions, right? And so I just think that when we start talking about, comparing Nazi Germany, comparing Holocausts, to public policy, to what's happening today, you really are minimizing it. And as we're losing, those generations, those witnesses to the Holocaust, we start it fades into history, and then we forget the mistakes of history. And I think that is the most dangerous. That is the most dangerous thing that any of us can do, is to forget the lessons of history. And that brings me to my other political rant I'm going to make today, because I'm on one about this. Prosecuting Donald Trump, right? The Mar-a-Lago fiasco, where, you know, I take tongue in cheek. They took his you know, maybe Trump stole some of Jack Kennedy's porn, and we got some. Maybe there was a phaser that he found from the alien spaceship that crashed, right? If there was, you know, if you believe in that, what do you believe? Do you believe, like Mulder, that an alien ship crashed, and Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago has some of that technology, and he's saving it for maybe the next time they come for him? But in all seriousness, though, they're wasting their fucking time. We got bigger fucking fish to fry. By making a martyr out of Donald Trump, what are you doing? You're empowering Donald Trump. So spend all this energy to say, oh, look how terrible they are to me. Look, they raided my house. No, I mean, even Mike Pence, like the defense said, why did they do this? No other presidents ever had this happen to them before, right? And at the same time, Mike Pence is saying, please don't stop saying defund the FBI. It's like he's realizing these people are fucking idiots, right? And these fucking idiots may put that fucking idiot back in the White House again. Now, I'm not making a judgment call on you if you support Donald Trump for other reasons, but there's a lot of fucking idiots out there that think that this man has the best interests of the country at heart. I mean, how can you see that, right? I'm being intentionally provocative, because if the Democrats truly want to win in 2024 and in 2022, why are they giving ammo to the other side? Now, again, I am not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I switched either ways, and depending on the situation. But at the same time, all they're doing is guaranteeing that you're not going to get a moderate Republican running for the presidency, because, you know, it seems to be that they want to just speak to the lowest common denominator, right? And what was the lowest common denominator in the early 1930s in Germany, right? Think about that. What was the lowest common denominator? What put people like Himmler, these little petty-minded yes men, into power was this exact type of thinking. The thinking of the Reichstag, the Chancellor of Germany at the time, the leadership in Germany, thinking that we need to compromise, bring them to the table. Yes, bring them to the table. Well, they brought them to the table, and then they broke the whole fucking table throughout the table, right? They did a false flag fire. And now, ironically, the fascists that are rising in this country are using those same arguments again. They're using the arguments and saying, look at this, the other side are Nazis. What? Where's that coming from? Where's that coming from? If you don't learn the lessons of history, you're destined to repeat the lessons of history. And so I just feel that we need to kind of wake up. We need to start really, you know, they always say when they lose their arguments, they say, do your research, right? And then if you actually do your research, right, you find that their facts are very spotty, or they cherry pick things, right? It looks a certain way on the surface, but then it's cherry picked at the end of the day. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Joe Biden either. I think that the climate change bill should have gone further. I think that they should have gone further when it came to health care for all. That is a human right. And so it's about making this a better world for our children. And what's going to accomplish that? By continuing to create an environment where our environment is being destroyed. By thinking if you fucking buy a Tesla, you're saving the planet, and driving around in your fancy Tesla and not realizing all of everything that's going on with the lithium batteries. I mean, the oil industry, the lithium batteries, right? The medical industry at the same time. Are they trying to cure cancer? Or are they just trying to put you on drugs forever? at the same. Do they really want to make a cure? That's it. They don't have to put you on the drugs forever. They cost thousands of dollars, right? And that's so it's like they've all of the politicians. They're all bought and paid for by the same people. And this is in the United States, probably the same in the UK. It's the same in Israel. It's the same everywhere, right? This is not just an American issue. This is a worldwide issue where it's corporate America. That's what it is. It's the idea of pure capitalism, unadulterated, unregulated, pure capitalism. I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for making a good buck, having a good living. And so I want to end on, I'm a big sci-fi fan, and we finally got through the Orville New Horizons and the last episode. And so my thoughts on the last episode, and as you know, last week, if you weren't here last week, I was a little kind of lukewarm on this season. I really enjoyed the first two seasons. I enjoyed watching the panels at Comic-Con the first year. Seth MacFarlane was there for the first year I was at Comic-Con, which was right before 2019. It was hilarious. This year it just looked like he was calling it in a little bit, right? But when he directed and wrote some of those stories, some of the storylines were really important. Again, if you're listening, Seth MacFarlane, Mr. MacFarlane, I'm a big fan of you. I think your writing is amazing. I love the voices. Stewie had a huge impact on one of my sons into joining the IDF, and that's a story for another time. It's a funny story, but a disturbing story at the same time. It's actually really funny. But the last episode of the Orville, I thought, was, critics say it kind of was all over the map. It was actually very funny. I mean, if you haven't seen it yet. But it made also another very interesting point in terms of history and how you have to learn the lessons of history. And so the premise here was that there was somebody that lived on a planet much like Earth in the 21st century with all the problems that we have today. And so she came into contact with people from the Orville. And she had the opportunity, and she saw all the amazing technology. They got replicators. They can end hunger, right? They weren't called replicators. They're called food synthesizers because, they don't want to mess with Star Trek. Again, that's all my gripes. It's like, is it Star Trek or is it the Orville? Like, the Orville was funny because it was refreshing because it was making fun of the next generation, and it had those Family Guy elements of humor in it at the same time. This third season, Disney just took it and probably just pounded on Seth MacFarlane's head and said to him, you gotta make it more Disney, right? You gotta make it more Attack of the Clones. Well, please don't do that. And then please fire your music guy at the same time, right? There's no space with the music, right? But so anyway, to go back to this lady, she was picked up by the end. She stole some of their communications technology. And she says, after knowing this wonderful galaxy out there, and I can travel, meet all these species, I can't just live on this planet that has no health care and everyone works, a 9-to-5 job or whatever. It's all about money. They go into this perfect utopian society where. By the way, the word utopia means nowhere, which means it cannot exist. But this society where people gain satisfaction, gain their status through their achievements, right? If you're an awesome chef, you become an awesome chef, right? And you're lauded for that. It's not about money. You could be rich. Everything's provided for you. There's no need to spend the money. So she's like, she started feeling guilty and wanted to go home and go back to her planet and maybe make a difference there. But what does she do? She stole alien technology. She's not alien technology. She stole the technology from the Orville to take back so they could end food hunger. She actually took all the technology back. And it wasn't until Commander Grayson, right? She took her to this simulated planet and said, "This is what happens if corporations, if a society hasn't reached that point where they realize that we're all in it together, and then just the very rich just keep everything for themselves." And this planet was basically desolated by nuclear war because of the advanced technology that they had, right? Now science fiction, and this goes back to Jules Verne and all the science fiction, has always been a foreshadowing of our own future. And so when we think about it, we're heading in that direction. We have all these nuclear weapons that are just out there, right? When is there going to be a point? Like, I can't believe there hasn't been an accident already. And so seriously, what they were talking about at that last episode of the Orville was learning the mistakes of history, but not just for the present, but also for what happens in the future. And that's going to bring me to my final topic, and I always like to bring some Judaism into it, right? The future. Now, in Judaism, we're going to be celebrating a new year. This weekend, in fact. What is it the new year of? Well, it's the new year of animals. There are 4 Jewish New Years every year, right? You have, so we don't count like, New Year in the solar calendar, in the Gregorian calendar, right, begins in January, right? That's the new year. So we count the months from January. In the Hebrew calendar, you actually count the months from Nisan, right? Which is not the first month. That's the first month. So that's the new year for months. Is Nisan, which where Passover falls on Nisan, which is springtime, ironically enough. Then you have Tu B'Shvat, which comes right afterwards. That's the new year for trees, for agriculture. Then you have so you have the new year of months, right? The how we count time, right? Timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, so we get to the sci-fi aspects of it. Then we have Tu B'Shvat, which is a great one. We do bonfires, we sing, we dance. It's real fun. In Israel, they plant trees, lots of barbecues, and bonfires. And then you have the third one, which comes on the 1st of Elul, which will be this Saturday night coming. And that's the New Year for animals. And that's an interesting one because what it is shepherds in ancient times would tithe from their stock, from whatever cattle, whatever animals that they have that they use as part of their business. And that idea of tithing. It's the only time where a new year is associated with tithing. I think it's very interesting that the Jewish years, and of course you have Rosh Hashanah, right, the Jewish year, and that's for humanity. That's for all of humanity, where we're supposed to, and that's coming up as well. We'll talk about that a little bit as we come into Elul. I'd like to talk about every week. I'm going to do a little bit of discussions about self-improvement. But at the same time, the year of having a new year for animals recognizes the importance and the animal soul. There is in Jewish Talmudic philosophy and in Jewish philosophy, there's this idea that an animal has a soul. And we know that the original human beings were, in fact, as a parable, right? So Adam and Eve initially were vegetarians, and there are many Dati Leumi, right, National Zionist Jews, who believe as we've come back in the land of Israel, they should also be vegetarians because they believe that they're approaching a time where it's an ingathering of the exiles again, and and that the need for us to eat meat will no longer be needed when Moshiach comes, when the Messiah comes. Now, again, I think this is all metaphor. I'm not ready to give up my a good steak. Or my In-N-Out burger once in a while. It's not kosher, I know. Once in a while. And then, but the idea of treating animals humanely, recognizing they're not just subjects for the objects for your own use, for your own, that you have to recognize that they have value. And I think that's what this is evolving to recognize that we're celebrating a new year, not just for animals, and there's a new year for human beings. Maybe at some point, right? And that in the Orville, right? Killing animals is considered murder, right? We can make that argument, but. Right, we know that there are certain animals that our biology has been bred to eat at some point. So that's scientifically speaking that we should be meat eaters. We need certain of not to say that if we can have that whole argument about vegetarian versus meat eaters. But at the same time, it's not necessarily about. It's also about recognizing that that there are. You look at your cat or your dog. Or a pig, right? A pig's a very intelligent animal. I know my cat is planning on taking over the world, one of my cats is planning on taking over the world. Ray, if you look at my Facebook page, you'll see that picture I took. Ray is secretly planning on taking over the world. We did name her from after Ray Skywalker from Star Wars. She seems to have taken that on very seriously. I have not had a conversation with her because I have yet to reach that level where I can talk to cats. But our cats are like our animals. Our animals are so important to the ecological balance on Earth, and so the Torah is recognizing that by having a new year for animals. And so, be nice to your pets today. Maybe, think about it. Think about a little bit of gratitude if you drive and get a taco. It's a taco supreme. Have a little bit of gratitude for the animal that gave its life for you. I think everybody now is not going to eat an animal because of that. But I think that important idea of having these 4 New Years, not just one, right? Not just one for people, recognizes that we're all part of something bigger. That we're specks in terms of time, in terms of history. And, going back to this idea of not making mistakes of history, but by counting time, which is such a foundational element in Judaism, the way we count time, the way we celebrate every new moon, right? The way we look at the moon, we look at the different phases. Each Jewish holiday, most of the Jewish holidays fall on a full moon, right? These are all, time is so essential to the way Judaism is observed, and the way that the philosophy around Judaism is so focused on time, because it realizes how precious the time that we have on this earth is. And by seeing the New Year of Animals as something, we recognize that we're not the only ones that are precious, right? The earth is precious. The animals that live on the earth are precious. The trees, Tu B'Shvat, the agricultural aspects of it. They are trees. Without trees on this planet, we're all going to suffocate, right? We're cutting down all these fucking trees, we're all going to suffocate. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. Or you're talking about the flash floods that may happen in California, the gigantic ones. Well, it's supposed to be global warming, but it's raining. What? Do they understand how heat causes the rain? Right? Mojave in Death Valley, there was the worst flash flood they've ever had, and now they're talking about one that's coming up. Why? Because they're cutting down all the fucking trees. Because we think that we've politicized climate change in favor of making a buck. Well, we don't fuck. You're really going to be fucked when your beautiful house in Venice is underwater, or those people those people that don't give a fuck and have all their beach houses on the East Coast are going to be underwater. What are they going to do then now? They're going to move next door to me in Palm Desert, right? And realize, shit, it's really hot here. So, at the end of the day, this is not just going to affect poor people. It's going to affect poor people first. But by the time it affects the rich, they're not going to give a shit until they lose their Teslas, right? I don't know why I'm on one about Teslas today, but, yeah, they're cool cars. Right? They're cool, but don't think because you're driving a Tesla, you're saving the fucking planet. You're not, right? You're just causing more problems in Africa and other places too, where they, you want to really do something, stick as much money into the idea of free cold fusion, where you can have free unlimited power. We already have that in the sun, right? Put all the money into that, right? Elon Musk, with your little spaceship going up on the moon so that you could, mine the moon? We're going to fuck up the moon now? That's our big, huge plan, right? Are you learning anything from history? I don't think so. They're not learning jack shit from history. So, I'm not knocking anyone wants to drive a Tesla because they're cool. My wife said to me, you rip on Teslas. And the only reason I ripped on one was because I accidentally scraped the door of a Tesla in a parking lot when I was dropping my son off at college. And we thought, it's a tiny little scratch. So, we didn't know it was over $1,000 worth of damage, right? How's that helping the planet? It's not. So I got to think about Teslas. But then my wife pointed out, if someone gave me a Tesla, I'd be happy to drive it. I think they're cool cars. I'm just saying, don't think that that's the only answer. Right? We need to really develop renewable energy in a profound sense. This is not just about making a profit, right? It's about making lives better for people, about, maybe doing something to make this planet survive for our grandchildren. I mean, I know a lot of kids nowadays, they don't want to have as many kids. You look at the poorer countries, they're not having as many children, right? I used to think the population change was population growth, right? You have to limit population. That was the only way to save the planet. That's not true, right? It's greed. It's the greed of the very, very small minority who wants to keep everything for themselves. That is the real fucking issue. Maybe Elon Musk should stop having so many fucking children, right? This is the only day I'm going to drop those F-bombs. I don't know why I'm doing it today. So I just in that mood for it. But at the same time, if you don't learn the lessons of history, you're bound to make those mistakes again. And just by shrouding it in something else and trying to fit that round peg into a square hole, or a square peg into a round hole, because sometimes the hole can be bigger. By doing that and saying that this is something that it's not, is just disingenuous, and it's just more people, billionaires trying to be bigger billionaires. There's enough to go around, really, to feed this whole fucking planet. Learn the mistakes of history, or we're bound to make them again, and we're making them over and over again, and then we complain. Why are things the way they are? So we celebrate those 4 Jewish New Years so that we can recognize time. We can recognize the future. We can look at the past. We can see how what we do in this present has that impact, can have a major impact on society. And as individuals, right, we observe that. We can be conscious of that. We can have a mindfulness of that. And in each of our own ways, and with our own talents, can make that difference. And that's why we want to have that awareness. That's why we want to wake up. And so as we come into Elul, that shofar, next week we're going to start blowing the shofar every morning. So if you pray every morning, you blow the shofar. I'm going to blow the shofar. Hopefully not blow out my microphone at the same time. So with that said, live long and prosper. Be good to each other. And I will see you tomorrow. Peace out.